I am just super starstruck and very excited to be able to present the next speaker. First time I met Huver Pousada was at Sene Cafe in Colombia, where he taught me how to cross-pollinate trees, coffee trees. He spoke Spanish very fast, so I didn't learn much, but fortunately I filmed it, so I could see what he was doing. He also showed me a book that they have there, where they recorded all the pollinations they did, and I think it started in 1968. And that was the Variedad Colombia, I think. And then the Castillo has built on that. So Huver is pretty much the father of the Castillo. He has been in charge of developing Castillo. So now is the time to ask the really tough questions. Huver has been researching the interaction between genotype and environment. And based on his experiments, he has learned to understand what affects coffee quality more. You're also working with some biochemical research, and is very much involved in developing varieties. Right now, he assumed the direction of National Extensionist Service in the Colombian Coffee Growers Federation, the FNC. That means the guys with the yellow shirts, I think, that helps the farmer to improve their farming practices and so on. So without further ado, Mr. Huver Pousada.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for the invitation, and definitely for me it's an honor to be here and to share with you all the information of the work that we are doing in Sene Cafe, in FNC. And for today, basically, what I want to do is to share with you all the work that we are doing in Colombia in the improvement of the coffee varieties. And I think if you want to talk about coffee in the future, and you want to talk about coffee with very good adaptation and very good quality profile, definitely the improvement of the coffee variety is something that all the countries need to work and start to work at this time. This is part of the presentation, so at the beginning I will talk a little about the coffee origin and distribution, what are the challenges for Colombia coffee sustainability, and some of the methodological approach that we are using at this time in order to select the best varieties for Colombia. And it's not only COPS and Royal profile, but we are combining at this time different strategies. One of the principal concerns for all countries that is producing coffee is the climate change and climate variability. And I will explain how we are addressing this kind of the challenge. And at the end, I will spend some minutes talking about the variability that is present in the different collections across the world, and what is the variability that is present in the Colombia coffee yarboard plants or garden with different varieties that we have, and a little about the coffee origin denomination project that is something that Michael mentioned this morning. At the end, we are looking at the new varieties for Colombia. I think this is a very nice picture, and I don't know if you have the opportunity to see really what's going on inside of the flower. Because if we are looking about the variety, it's important to see what are the different parts that you have in this kind of the flower. First, we are talking about the Arabica varieties, and Arabica varieties, the principal characteristics is a self-fertilizer, so it's autogamous plants. That means that all this part that is here, that is the male parent, is going to this part that is the female parent. So it's not possible to cross. It's possible to cross from another plants, but the majority of the pollination came from this part that is outside of the flower. The other thing is, you see, you have different flowers in the same branch with different stages. So this is important to see that. Try to concentrate sometimes the flowering time and to concentrate the harvesting time in the plants is not only a responsibility of the plant, it's also responsibility of the environmental condition. That I understand very well the expression of the plant and the environmental condition is something that we have to keep in mind, not only in the production, but also in the quality. This is probably clear for you, but basically that I want to show you. You see this area here, and this area represents the dispersion of the all variation that is present in the Coffea canephora species. And this was here that is in blue line, correspond to another species from the Coffea genus, that is the Eugenioides variability. And here is more a recently event, that is the variation that is found in Arabica species. That means that Arabica species came from the cross between Canephora and cross probably from the Eugenioides. And all variation is moving to another part from Ethiopia. And this is Ethiopia. And this is Ethiopia, and this is the different place where the different collections were taken by our organization, and also from the French mission. And basically that we have here is the different villages where the plants were collected many years ago. And we have a lot of variation here in the germplant that was introduced and sent not only to Colombia but also to Brazil and Central America. And this explains how these germplants from Arabica start to move across the world, and finally how these plants arrive to South America. But at the end, we see a lot of variation at the beginning here in Ethiopia, but only parts of this variation was moved to the other countries. At the end, only few plants, that was Bourbon and Typica, arrived to the American continent. This graphic represents how is the origin of the different varieties that are planted in America in general at this time. We start with Typica and we start with Bourbon. There are two events. One is the mutation. Mutation is only a change in only one gene. The principal mutation in Typica is San Bernardo. Typica is a tall plant, San Bernardo is a dwarf plant, but all of them are very sensible to the rust. Another important mutation in Typica is Maragohip. Today, Michael also mentioned this plant, and this plant, the principal mutation is the plant is tall, but the leaves is bigger compared with the Typica, and the beans also is overexpressed in the size. And here is one example of the selection. Blue Mountain. Blue Mountain is not a variety. Blue Mountain is not a mutation. Blue Mountain is only a selection that perform very well in particular environments. If we analyze a little the Bourbon, the principal mutation in Bourbon is Caturra. Bourbon is a tall plant, and Caturra is a dwarf plant. So at the end, it's possible to see that Caturra is like a Bourbon. So if we see all this graphic here, and you see that I put in color, what color is this?
Orange.
Orange, exactly. It's because when all these plants are very susceptible to the rust, because this is the particular color of the rust disease. And we have a different types of varieties here, or different names, but at the end, the genetic information in these varieties is the same. That is the reason why when the rust came to the American continent, all these varieties start to be affected by the coffee rust. The rust here in Brazil, I think 1970, something like that. But at that time, all the countries start to improve the coffee varieties against coffee rust. Colombia used the Timor hybrid, and the other countries use another kind of the Timor hybrid. And Colombia used or released the resistant variety that was Colombia in 1983. Before the rust appeared in Colombia, Colombia improved the varieties and have at that time the answer to the Colombian coffee farmers with one variety resistant to the coffee rust. After that, 2 years after that, we released the Castillo variety that basically used the same parents, used Caturra and used the Timor hybrid, but in a different strategy. We released a Colombia, we recommend Colombia across all the country. We call this kind of the varieties varieties with wide adaptation to the whole country. But with the Castillo, we start to perform G/E interaction, plants by environmental interaction, and start to select only plants according to the environmental conditions. So one of the differences between Castillo and Colombia is this has some particular adaptations in particular regions in Colombia. But also we increase a little the productivity in the variety, like 5 or 15% more compared with Colombia and also compared with the Caturra. Another country like Central America, especially Costa Rica and in Brazil, they use a different strategy and release these varieties resistant to the coffee roast. But at the end, all the countries use the same parents for improvement of the coffee varieties. I don't know if you have a time to see this picture that is in the coffee test room, but I like this because you see different names, different trees, different branches, and the question is how much variability we have in this tree. And we start to see, this is Rubiaceae. Rubiaceae is the family. Rubiaceae family has like 500 or 600 genus. One of the genus is coffee. So I think we need to put here is coffee, the coffee genus. And that we have here is 4 of the principal 100 species that are present in the coffee genus. One is Liberica, Coffee Antoni, that was recently incorporated in the list, Eugenioides and Canephora. I explained before that the cross between Eugenioides and Canephora produce another species that is Arabica. So we have 5 species in this tree. If you see this branch, we analyze this branch, you see the Liberica. Liberica is important for the improvement of the coffee varieties because there is one resistant gene important for the improvement of the coffee varieties. And in these 2 lines, S795, you have a resistance to the coffee roast. So this is introgress line, like this line here that came from the Timor hybrid. But if we continue in the tree, we see here all the introductions that came from Ethiopia. You see the Jima, the Narea, the Kafa, the Dila, the Dila, so all the original introduction of puree lines that came from the origin in Ethiopia. There is another accessions that came from Yemen, basically is Típica, and here in Típica we see some selections like Villalobos or Pluma Hidalgo or Típica Amarillo, but also we start to see the mutation in Típica that is Maragogipe. Maragogipe is crossed with some of the dwarf plants, for example, Pacas, and they produce another variety that is Pacamara. Is a Pacas. Pacas is a selection from Caturra that was this cross with Maragogipe produce a Pacamara. If we analyze a little the Bourbon, you see some of the Laurina. For example, Laurina is important because the low content of caffeine, and Caturra, that is the dwarf variety. And in this part of the tree, you start to see some of the Catimores lines. Here is Colombia, here is Cafe, and here is. But at the end, it's a cross between Caturra and the Timor hybrid, and Timor hybrid is a plant that is a cross between Arabica and one Canephora. So at the end, all the origin of the commercial varieties that are planted across the world use part of the Canephora in genetic information. Now the question is, how is the variability that is present in this tree? If we see here, all this material except this one and except this one here are resistant to the coffee roast. But if we are looking for something in quality, especially, probably we need to explore more this part of the tree, because we have a lot of variation here in quality, and I will show you in a minute how we are perform approach to see the variability that we have here for quality aspects. But at the end, if we are looking for plants or coffee plants with very good adaptation to climate change, probably we have to look again in this kind of the plants, and also probably in the future we need to look what is the variation in Canephora in order to find more resistant genes to adapt at low altitudes, at high temperatures, because try to find this information here will be impossible. Impossible, no, it's a low variation that is present for this particular characteristic. I think this picture summarizes very well what is going on in the modern coffee varieties. We start with a very good variation in the wild species when the plants start to move from the principal origin. We reduce in the domestication process the variability, and that we have today in the modern varieties is a reduction in this variability. So the challenge that we have for the future is try to increase again this variability in order to have more adaptation, to have response to the climate change, and also try to fight for another aspects important in the coffee quality aspects. Okay, the challenges for Colombian coffee sustainability. This picture summarizes very well all the previous slides, and basically is when the typical Bourbon came to the American continent, but also is one for Colombia is the creation of the National Federation Company, that is the company that I work in at this time. It was created in 1927, but the first work in this company was first to make some kind of the regulation in the trade coffee in Colombia, but also 10 years after that, start to incorporate technical agronomists in order to support the Colombia coffee farmers. But at the same time was the creation of the CENICAFE. CENICAFE is the National Coffee Research Center that has the responsibility to generate the technology for the Colombia coffee farmers. So I say that the more principal activities from the company, the extension service, and the research. And here is in 1965 that we had the opportunity to receive part of the material from Ethiopia, and this is the material that we use for the improvement of the coffee varieties. And the coffee roast in 1983 and the coffee water in 1988 only explained to us the vulnerability that we have in the varieties. And today we are talking about the climate change, and these three aspects impact or reduce the coffee production not only in Colombia, but also in Central America, in Ecuador, and also in Peru. And part of the answer to this kind of the problems is the release of the improvement variety like Castillo, and also the release of another variety that is variety Tab. Because we are talking about the improvement of the coffee varieties, I think it's important to show very quickly how we make the process. Okay, this is the flowers that we take, and these flowers we will use like a male parent, and this plant that we remove everything from the flower, and we only leave the female parent. We use and cross this pollination, and we protect these flowers. There are two kind of the varieties that the coffee farmers are planted at this time. One is the monolines, and second is the multilines. What is the difference between monolines and multilines? To give that explanation, it's important to see that Caturra, Typica, and Bourbon has one resistant gene, that is the gene SH5. But this gene was broken, or was the plant was started to be sensible when the rose appeared in the American continent. But if we see the Timor hybrid, we have a very good option in all major resistant genes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if we need to create a multi-line, we need to try to combine this gene in individual combinations, or we need to combine this gene by 3, by 2, or by 3, or by 4, or by 5. At the end, it's like a permutation game, but at the end you have different, in 21 lines with different plants, you have the combination of this gene. For Colombia, we use this strategy in order to have a durability in the resistance in the plants that were released to the coffee farmers. because if we use only one combination, probably the variety will be more sensible to the coffee roast, or the durability of the resistencia will be less compared with the multi-line variety. This is basically the difference in the varieties. And this is the scheme that we use. I explained how to cross. This is Caturra, and this is the Timor hybrid. We take the pollen or the male parent from this plant and we put in the flowers in Caturra. In the first generation, all plants are dwarf and all plants are resistant. Many of you probably say, okay, the work was done, but no, because if you take seed from this generation, you start to see this kind of the segregation. And basically it's because in the first generation, all plants are dwarf and resistant, is because these two traits are dominant in the genetic aspects in the coffee plant. When you see this generation, this segregation in the generation F2, you start to select the plants that you are looking for. If you are looking dwarf plants with resistance, so you start to take the seeds from these plants, and you go until generation F5. In generation F5, all the traits in the plants are stable. The productivity, the quality, the resistance to the roast, the different aspects about the bean characteristics, for example. So that is the reason why when you start the cross, you have to go to the generation F5. How many years take to go in this process? Maybe 20, 25 years. So improve the coffee varieties is a very hard work, and you start to see what kind of the characteristics you need to evaluate to 20 or 25 years. You see, you have here the different generations, and you have the different characteristics that you need to test. You see the vigor of the plant. If you are looking for tall or dwarf varieties, the phenotype basically is how the plant looks like, the grain characteristics of the beans, the production, but here the adaptation is important trait. Adaptation is basically you start in generation F3 to prove these varieties in different environmental conditions in order to see how the expression in resistance, in quality, and in production. And you start to see the sensorial profile also in generation F3, F4, and F5. The resistance to the roast is something that you see permanently in the different generations. But also, we see resistance to the CBD. CBD is a coffee bean disease. It's not present in Colombia, but we send all the plants that is in generation F3 or F4, we send to Africa or we send to Portugal, and they test the plants with some of the isolate that they have for this fungus. Today, we incorporate a new evaluations in order to link this sensorial profile. Now we are talking about the biochemical content, basically in some biochemical compounds that we know are linking to the coffee quality. We see the environmental effect in the interaction plants by environment, and also we perform DNA marker selections because we identify some DNA markers that are linked to the principal characteristics of the plants, and some metabolomics approach, all of them in order to link with the sensorial profile. At the end of the result is the susceptible. This gene was broken, and we incorporate this gene from the Timor hybrid. At the end of the result is this kind of the plant. But if I take seed only from this plant, it will be a multi-line. But if I have different lines, a generation I find that is the multi-line variety. What are the methodological approaches that we are using for link sensorial profile quality? One is the near-infrared analysis. This is the near-infrared analysis. This is an indirect way in order to see the biochemical information that is inside the coffee beans. We you have a huge database, like 10,000 samples in the database, and we select the more representative samples from the database. I will send these samples to the analytical reference, and the people start to see the content of caffeine. Caffeine is important trait in the biochemical compounds. We don't like to have coffee plants with high caffeine. The average content in caffeine in Arabica is 1.4, so 1.6 is no good, or 7 or 2. Chlorogenic acids, when you have a high level of the chlorogenic acid, you start to lose some good attributes in the coffee profile. Sucrose and lipids, I can say that there are biochemical markers for good quality. And important to see is what is the interaction of these biochemical compounds in the interaction with the environment. That is part of the secret, that is part of the information that we incorporate in the selection of the lines, or in the selection of the specific region for a specific quality. And today, I could do a very good presentation about the comparison with Caturra and Castillo. And this is the biochemical information, how to use. Always we incorporate Caturra like the check before select our lines. And we are looking for varieties that performs very close to Caturra. This is for one specific environment, and this is for another specific environment. So this is the way how we use the biochemical information using near-infrared spectroscopy in order to select the lines for these particular characteristics. This is the distribution of the resistant and susceptible varieties now in Colombia. We explained that here in the central part of the country, that we have a very good environmental conditions for the expression of the coffee roast. The majority of the area is planted with resistant varieties. The roast start to be very aggressive here in 1983 in the central part of the country, Antioquia, Caldas, Quindío, and Risaralda. And now the roast showed to us that the roast has a very good adaptation to all areas across the country. Today, it's important to understand very well what's going on with the climate change. So for us, we incorporate, this is a representation of the network of the different weather stations that we have across the country. We have almost 500 different weather stations, and they record information every hour about the temperature, precipitation, distribution, humidity, solar radiation. And we use this information with world tropical weather stations, like 300 that are located across the tropical area in the world. And we put this information in a new information and predict the climate for each individual region and for each individual, I can say, farm in Colombia, in order to see which are the areas with more variability and more vulnerability to the climate change. And this is only one example how we use this information. This is the south part of the country, this is the central, and this is the north. And you will start to see what's going on in the Niña event in the last years. We will start to see the increase of the precipitation in the majority of the areas, but more in one areas compared to in others. But we will start to see the reduction of the radiation. These two factors explain not only the production of the coffee, but also explain the expression of the coffee roast in the susceptible materials planted in Colombia. And this is another information that we use. This is information from almost 40 years that is present in this weather station. And it's a kind of the monitoreo that we are doing all the areas across the country, from the north and the south, and we identify the region that has some problems with the humidity is not enough for the development of the coffee plants. Okay, now let me talk in the last part of my presentation about what we are doing with the Gerboplums collection. So I will show some of the results of the molecular markers, biochemical content, and the sensorial profile. This is the DNA information. This is all the materials that we have from Ethiopia. Basically, that we can see here, we have a lot of these introductions performed in the same way. From the genetic point of view, they are very close, but we have some introductions that are far from this group. So that means that we have some genetic variation in this material. The important to see is what kind of the variation we have in these materials. You see the results for biochemical content, and you see, for example, the lipids. You see a lot of variation in the content of the lipids. And I explained that this is a biochemical marker for us in order to select introductions with a very good coffee profile. And also the chlorogenic acids, you see the variation. So with this information and the DNA information, you have a better idea what kind of the thermoplants you can select and you incorporate for the improvement of the coffee varieties for the future. If you see the sensorial profile, you see some of them is the low performance. You have some introduction that perform very similar to the Czechs. Caturra, Typica, Bourbon, but you have some introduction that the standings compared with the Czech is very good. So this kind of the introduction, we are now incorporating the improvement of the coffee varieties. I will have some crosses with Castillo and all of these introductions that we have in this part of the graphic. The second project and the last project is the origin like umbrella for Colombia differentiation, and basically is the opportunity that we have to visit all the farms across the country. We start this work with CIAS, Central International Agriculture Center, and basically that we have is a very good characterization of the Colombia that is planted across the country. And when you see this strategy only to have a very good characterization, to have a better idea about the quality that is possible to produce in the country. We know that in general in the south part of the country we have a very good acidity in the coffee, but if you see to the north, we start to lose the acidity, but the body in the cup start to be important. And in the middle of the country, basically you have a balance between acidity and oil. But this is the information that you collect in the last years. At the end, it's important to keep in mind that the quality is a characteristic very complex. It's important the genotypes. It's important to understand very well the environmental factors that are involved. But also is the important the agronomic factors, and we explained very well this morning that the shade or the village position or the altitude or the nutrition are aspects that have some implication in the quality, and all the process that is in the picking and the pulping, fermentation, all this process has effect at the end in all the quality aspects. So the future in the new varieties is variability in the genotype, in the architecture of the plant, the yield potential, the resistance to the coffee roast, the CBD, high expression in coffee quality, and identification of the best combination, variety, and violence. It was the presentation that I prepared for you. I expect you enjoy. If you have any question, please let me know.
Thank you, Huver. Please sit down. We'll have a little panel on stage. I would like to invite, of course, Michael Sheridan. Are you still here? Michael? Yeah. Marta Dalton, farmer from Guatemala, right? And Tim Wendelbo, which is me. I'm just going to start to comment. Jens, maybe you should take this
Yeah, I got it. I'll give you a...
So when you talk to baristas over, when you go to any coffee training with a barista, including myself and others, we have tended to say, yeah, all the institutions, they develop new varieties, they only are focused on yields and not quality. I think you proved us wrong. So much work going on the Castillo, and obviously we tasted it earlier today that it actually has very good quality. But I'm not going to talk too much. I would like you other guys to comment if you have any comments.
I have not participated in breeding processes, but I know breeders and I know people who work with breeders, and everyone who knows breeders assured me that they don't work on sensory issues. And I think, as Tim said, there's very clear evidence that there was close work between the breeders at Seni Cafe and the people working in quality at the quality office. Some of the conversations we had over lunch and over the Castillo Cultura cuppings this morning were that Castillo doesn't have a quality problem as much as it has a public relations problem. That it was the way it was released and the conditions surrounding the 2010 Cup of Excellence created a kind of little cloud of scandal around or controversy around the variety that kind of positioned it unfairly in the marketplace. And I think, one thing this is easy to say from the outside, but one observation is so many of the people who were so clearly opposed to Castillo for sensory reasons, ultimately when they tested it in a controlled environment, were inclined very favorably toward it. And so it feels like moving forward in the future generations of these varieties, as we try to marry higher cup quality with strong resistance to disease, that the critics should be part of the process, not just people from the Federation's tasting office, but the people who are most opposed to hybrids, to participate in the process, because I feel like we did lose a lot of time and we spent a lot of energy debating over Castillo when we could have just been planting it with less resistance. So, just an observation.
Well, I had a, can you hear me? Okay. Closer. All right, I got a loud voice. I had just a general question from the presentation. Could you describe a little bit more about the Blue Mountain? You mentioned the Blue Mountain is just the Típica,
A selection.
A selection of Típica planted in a specific region. One, is that what Blue Mountain is? Are there any relations, and could you just describe that a little bit more?
It's not only with Blue Mountain. The same situation is with Pacas and Villas Archins in Ravenna. The farmers in Pacas and Villas Archins, they select some plants with Caturra and they put the name from the village. But at the end, it's only a selection in one specific environment, but there is no genetic variation in the material. So it's the same with yeah, exactly, it's only phenotypic difference. But you see the DNA, you see what's going on inside of the variety. Basically, it's the same. And the Blue Mountain is the same. It's a typical. It's many times when I was in Seni Cafe, in my work, many people request Blue Mountain from seed from Blue Mountain. And I say, I don't have Blue Mountain, but I have a Típica. Típica basically is the same.
And is Hidalgo La Pluma is also in the selection?
Yeah.
Question? Over, there's a lot of farmers who want seeds from Geisha and SL28 and stuff. Is Seni Cafe releasing those to farmers if they want them?
Now we are working in some process that we call innovation. So many people are requesting, especially medium farmers or big farmers, that they want to move in a different varieties, but they know the risk that they have with the materials. Because Geisha is a susceptible material at this time, is with low yield potential, it has some problems in the root structure. So the people want to know that and they want to take the risk. That is the problem. but we are release any material that the farmers request from FNC, we release these materials.
Taylor?
Question? Yeah.
Taylor?
I don't know, I think you may have answered this already, but I just want to clarify. When you're in the process of deciding which varieties to cross to create Castillo, did you try many different kinds, or did you just look at the things that pre-existed and said, well, this showcases this thing and this showcases this, and they will work together? Was there multiple coffees that you thought of that could be spliced, or?
Why Caturra?
Yeah.
Okay, if we need to improve a coffee variety resistant to the coffee roast, the first question that I have to answer is, what is the variation of the resistant genes to the coffee roast? And when I see the germo plants, in Arabica germo plants, the only plant that is resistant to the coffee roast is the Timo hybrid. Okay? So I don't have any choice to take the plants. But if you see all the Arabica collection that we have, there is some introduction that has incomplete resistance to the coffee roast. That means that it's possible the plants has sensible to roast, but that intensity of the roast doesn't affect the production. We can incorporate that kind of the genetic variation. If, for example, if today I have to look for resistance to coffee berry oil, we don't have any resistant genes in the German plants. So it's more difficult for the kind of situation. That means that the variation that we have in general in the coffee German plants is low for the majority of the traits.
So you're saying Caturra has some resistance to leaf rust, or?
Yep. Yeah, the gene SH5 is one of the major resistant genes. What those genes was broken in the coffee roast. We use Caturra with the Timo hybrid with the Castillo Colombia variety, but we use also Típica and Bourbon with the Timo hybrid. That is the variety that we mentioned in the presentation, and we have the opportunity to talk. That is Tabi. Tabi variety is a mix of Bourbon and Típica with the Timo hybrid.
Do we get to taste that today?
We get to taste that today.
Cool.
We have 11 samples on the table afterwards that Huver sent us, and I was roasting them, 50 samples altogether, because I had a sample roaster, and just chewing the beans, and yeah, you have a treat waiting for you, that's for sure. I didn't spit them out, and that's not what we're doing.
I had another question for you. You mentioned previously in response to my Blue Mountain question, that oftentimes the names, the same coffee varietal has different names, and I've seen it a lot in Guatemala. Sometimes when we're looking at buying coffee, someone will tell you like some crazy name that they named after their grandfather, but actually it's or whatever. I'm sure this is a thing. How do you think, from the producing countries, how do you think we can work together to uniform some of these issues?
This is an educational approach that we need to work, because now in Colombia, all the Colombian farmers are very confused about the varieties. Because there are many actors, especially in the specialty coffee sector, that are requesting hechas, bacamaras, mocas, mundo novos, bourbon amarillo, bourbon yellow bourbon, and the people are very confused about it, because people is thinking, or the farmers are thinking, that with only the variety, they have everything. They have a very good price, they have a very good yield, but at the end, they don't know anything about the interaction of plant with the environment or the plant agronomic management. So it's something that we are working at this time in our country, because the people are very confused, and basically it's because the people is here that geisha is $20 by pound, and so say, okay, I can pay 1 million of Colombian pesos for only 1 kilogram, and they want to move it.
But if everyone has geisha, the price will not be $20.
That is correct.
But we've seen that a lot in Guatemala with geishas and pacamaras. I can't tell you, I've tried so many nasty pacamaras and geishas, and it's actually really, it's so sad to see these farmers who kind of like preyed and blindly just planted a lot of coffee without any kind of, not in a controlled way. And not only was it bad to cut, but they had great urban plants before that they could have, on average, been paid a lot more for these lost plants, and now they've lost years, like 3 years until 3 to 5 years.
There is a special comment about the pacamara. I explained that Maragogipe is a mutant from Typica, that is Maragogipe, and Pacas is a selection from Natura. So at the end, the people try to reduce the height of the Maragogipe, because Maragogipe is tall, and for that reason they cross with Caturra or Pacas, and they call the variety Pacamara. But at the end, basically, the genes are the same. It don't make sense why the people want to move to this variety that's also in Pacamara more sensible to roast compared with the Caturra.
But they do taste very different. A Pacas and a Pacamara is completely different. Can you just explain, because we have a lot of baristas again who say, we cannot only plant Castillo in Colombia because the genetic diversity is too small. So what if the leaf rust cracks the code of the Castillo plant? When I met you the first time, you said the Castillo has 6 genes, that's 6 locks, and the leaf rust doesn't have the key yet to unlock the locks.
Exactly, the idea of the multi-long variety is because when you have different resistant genes, if the rust break down one of the genes, it's impossible for the rust to break down all the other genes. So it's like, I can say, it's like the other plants, resistant plants, protect to the other high frequency in the expression of the rust. It's impossible when you use this kind of strategy. You see 25 years after that Costa Rica 95 was released in Central America, you start to see that this monoline variety was attacked by the Rosalista. So for us, it's important to see that the strategy of the multi-line work very well in plants like coffee that is a perennial crop. So try to make the renovation every year or every 5 years is impossible with the coffee farmers. So we need to guarantee that the plants that we are releasing, the coffee farmers, stay a long time in the future.
I think one thing is coffee leaf rust, and we have seen catimores begin to lose their resistance. And over time, I think nature will find a way to break down the resistance. But we're talking about a much longer time horizon in the case of Castillo because of the multi-line resistance that Huver is talking about. But there is exposition to other risks. So ojo de gallo, which is another threat to which Castillo is susceptible. So I think one of the things I didn't get into in my talk this morning was the first time I gave it, it was at SCA Symposium, and the organizers of the event titled it Castillo or Caturra, a simple question. And I later said that the best answer to the question Castillo or Caturra is yes. The idea being that just like any of us might diversify our economic assets, growers diversify their varietal mix on their farms, and that's a smart strategy in terms of diversifying risk and also positioning themselves to take advantage of different segments of the market that are looking for single varietal lots. And so for me the question is not really Castillo or Caturra, it's what's going to be the anchor of my production system. And I think very clearly the answer is Castillo is the anchor of my production system. It's resistant and it produces good enough quality for me to participate actively in specialty markets. The question is, what do I complement it with? Because I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket and grow just one variety. And so that becomes for me the interesting question, that where industry can have some influence into the varietal mix in Colombia's coffee fields. Castillo will be the anchor, that's clear. What else do you want Colombian growers to grow that will respond to your needs in the marketplace, but will also be responsible for them to manage. You know what I mean, in terms of the risk that they're taking on, in terms of trade-offs between susceptibility and quality.
And I guess I'm just going to add to your comment or question. I think what's important is also for each farmer to understand what's the best varietal to complement Castillo that's good for that balance of weather for their specific microclimate on their farm, because not every farm has something slightly different. So even if people want geishas, you can't plant geishas everywhere for that cup quality.
This gets into a little bit of that, what Huver was talking about, you know, variety by environment, and it's increasingly called site-specific agriculture, where you're able to use really intensive data-driven information to make decisions about which varieties are optimal for each environment. Colombia has incredible information, as you saw, available about the specifics of each growing environment within the region, certainly within the 6 or 8 denominations of origin. So that kind of information can be fed. Most growers don't on their own have the ability to make that determination. What is my growing environment optimal for? But with the support of the Federation, those decisions could be made more on the basis of data and less on the basis of gut instinct.
Huver, how many different Castillos are in the market now in Colombia?
We have a General Castillo. General Castillo is a variety that adapts across all the country with a very good adaptation, wide adaptation to the country. But we have 7 regionals Castillo varieties that they perform, each of them perform very well in the different regions that we test. Some in the north, that is Pueblo Bello, close to the coast, the north part of the country. We have a Castillo Tambo close to the Ecuador border, for Nariño, for Cauca. And in the middle part of the country, we have a Naranjal Castillo, and Paraguaycito Castillo, Trinidad Castillo, and basically, yeah, seven varieties across the country.
I've been fortunate to taste some of them, where I know the specific Castillo, and some of them have been outperforming geishas on the table. So specifically Tambo and Naranjal has been my favorites so far, but they have not been grown in that area that they were supposed to be grown. So that's kind of interesting. I think that farmers are starting to experiment with different Castillos as well.
I have another question. You've talked and met with so many farmers. I guess a lot of everyone, Michael, Tim. What responsibility do you think that roasters and coffee buyers, baristas, people in the coffee community visiting a coffee farm have in terms of requesting different, making comments to farmers that might, like dictating, like the geisha. What kind of responsibility do you think the coffee community has when they're visiting new origins, farms, etc.?
Well, I personally never try to dictate, because it's their life income. Mm-hmm. And if I recommend them something that I know is very risky, like I've seen my neighbors now in Colombia that have leaf rust, and there's literally no leaves on the trees, no cherries, no nothing. It takes 2-3 years for them to get an income again. So I'm very careful with that. But I actually recommend Elias, that I work with in Colombia, to plant Castillo, different Castillos, as his sort of bread and butter, and then experiment with other varieties, but plant small amounts to see what performs well. And then if we like the flavor profile, we can plant more. But I always tell him there's a risk, and you have to spray more, and it costs more money to produce them. But if they cup, above 86, 87, 80, 90 points, I'm willing to pay a lot higher price for it as well.
Sure. But this, again, Elias, you've been working with for a while, right?
Yes.
I guess my comment is mainly like, sometimes if you're visiting a new farm, where you might not have that kind of rapport, it takes time to build up.
Yeah.
I've seen in some occasions people maybe attending a lecture that learn something, and all of a sudden make it like kind of like fact, right?
Yeah.
And request and demand a certain varietal, and then
Yeah, it can be devastating.
it
So
can be really devastating.
again, I'm really careful with saying you have to do this, you have to do that. What I've done with farmers in the past, if I want to change their processing, for instance, I will guarantee that I buy the coffee that they process in that way because it costs more money.
Sure.
So the downside of that is when the coffee doesn't taste great, I still have to buy it. But I try to be very careful with also the experiments that I do, so I don't completely mess up the coffees.
Sure.
But yeah, it's difficult, and I think a lot of the farmers are really, they see Elias's neighbor in a different area. He has a farm. He has planted geisha, and everyone wants seeds. But I cut the coffee now when I was there, and it was very average.
Mm.
So it's dangerous.
Very dangerous.
I think it's a great question. I appreciate the question. I think it's so important. I feel like I've been working in coffee for 12 years, but I'm a salaried NGO worker. And I don't buy and sell coffee. And I might make a suggestion on a farm or an observation, and growers will go, that's very interesting. And then they'll come a week later with a buyer, and the buyer will make the same suggestion, and they'll start working. That is to say, that word is, that perspective is weightier because it's coming from the marketplace, and it should be weightier, but there comes a responsibility with that. And I think what we're talking about here, and what a lot of people in the room do, is this kind of direct sourcing where they can say, I want to do a fermentation experiment, or I want to do a harvesting experiment, and I'll pay you, and I'll mitigate your risk. And that's a great way to be a buyer. But most growers don't participate in those kinds of conversations and those kinds of trading relationships. You guys are just a small percentage of the market. So other people have to read the signals that the market sends. And the big actors in the market who don't have direct contact, the signals they send is, give us more coffee. And how do you get more coffee? Well, you get a resistant variety. You do as best you can on quality, but you meet the demand for volume, and you maximize your income that way. And so I think that's what you're up against. If you want a specific variety, or you want a specific post-harvest process, is being able to communicate that, and in the context of your trading relationship, setting it up so you're mitigating a grower's risk. The grower is the person in the supply chain least able to bear risk, so let's not ask them to bear a lot of it. But what's happening all around those growers are these other dynamics that are not through direct trading relationships and are not as careful about mitigating risk. And so you're all in a context that may be undermining what you're trying to do, because incentives are different.
We're about to close, but I just thought we should have maybe some concerns or questions from the roasters about varieties and hybrids, and what are the thoughts?
Any questions?
Hello. I heard that Nespresso or Nestlé would actually invest 230 million new coffee trees in the world. Have you heard this rumor? I'm just wondering if it's true, whether you know what kind of tree it is, because
George
it would be rather important.
Clooney is starting a coffee farm?
Maybe.
I haven't heard anything. Have you heard anything? No. Confidential, probably.
Yeah, I had a question too before Chris. Do you think the bad press that the Castillo is getting also has to do with former experiments that didn't go so well doing the hybrids? Like I'm thinking about Rui 11 in Kenya, things like that. So now that we have a better technology to actually separate, but people are still hung up with the Rui 11, which was, I think it's just a horrible coffee.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Does somebody specifically own Castillo, like a company, or maybe you could talk a little bit about how that formed and generally what their purpose is? Is that possible?
And there's a trademark on
Only I noticed the trademark, and I see that a lot.
The owner of the Castillo is the Colombia Coffee Farmers, because the FNC is the company, and all the farmers are part of the company. So the objectives from the extension service and from the coffee research center came from the same farmers. Okay, so we produce the material and we release the materials. And basically, we are doing what they want that we have to put in the receipt in the extension service. So all the Castillo materials belong to the Colombian coffee farmers.
Anyone else? Dima?
Dimi?
Questions about varieties. Why you developed only Castillo project, not Tabi or Colombia? Which it's just because it's resistance or taste or something?
The majority of the plants or the area planted with coffee varieties in Colombia is tall varieties. The high varieties, the tall varieties is only 5% of the area. The 95% is dwarf varieties. At the same time, because we know that we have very good resistant genes in the Timor hybrid, we cross with Typica and we cross with Bourbon. And we release these materials from only some specific regions in Colombia, in Cauca, and also in the north part of the country, and basically for indigenous populations that they want to keep the traditional varieties, Typica and Bourbon, but now they are planting Tabic, and it's some kind of the approach in order to give more potentially the production with the resistant varieties. But important to see is Tabi is combination Bourbon and Typica with the same Timor hybrid that we use for Castillo. Yeah,
Great.
it's all variety.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to a very exciting topic now. Thank you, Huver.
I have one message. Huver brought some nice little informatic leaflets, one on fermentation and one on how they developed the Castillo variety. So we feel free to take one home.
Yeah, lots of them.
And then we're going to go count the 11 samples that Huver brought. And yeah, see you later.